We are reaching now the end of the first part of this MOOC on financial analysis. And it is time to put things together to reach a final diagnosis. A very fast growing company, more than 50% growth of sales per year, essentially in volume. Gremlin has seen its margins going down because of increased development and marketing cost. This negative scissor effect is due to the strategic weakness of Gremlin, too small and lacking any star product to impose its product to the distribution network. The net working capital grows faster than sales. Remember the trend in DSO, days of sales outstanding, or the average collection period of receivables, and DSI, days of sales in inventory, or the inventory turnover, which quickly transformed a positive cash flow from operation in 1996 into a heavy negative one in 1998. Issuing new shares was possible once in 1997, but cannot be repeated to face the huge needs generated by the growth of the business. This leads to a dramatic increase of the indebtedness. Even if the financial return remains more than acceptable, it is far from being enough to sustain the huge growth. At this stage, let's separate the lender's point of view and the shareholder's one. What the lenders are concerned with is the ability of the company to repay in due time its debt. We have extensively discussed this question in week 3 when we looked at the dynamic approach and the static approach of the financing. And if you are already a lender, the key question is, do I continue to lend? And what would be the ability of the company to repay in case of liquidation? This is the solvency issue, which depends upon two things. First, the proportion of the asset financed by equity. The higher this proportion, the better. Second, the liquidation quality of these assets. A head office on Fifth Avenue in New York City or a head office on the Champs-Élysées in Paris has obviously a better liquidation value than a plant producing textile or steel in the middle of nowhere. From a shareholder viewpoint, the concern is different and essentially focuses on the ability of the company to create value. In other words, as we have seen in the second video of week 4, to have a return on capital employed higher than the cost of capital employed, which you remember we call, to be shorter, the cost of capital. We have seen that this cost of money at the disposal of the company is a mix, a weighted mix of the cost of debt, an easy, explicit, contractual cost, and the cost of equity, a more difficult cost to assess as it is implicit, non-contractual cost reflecting the shareholder's expected return. The specialists call this mix the WACC, the weighted average cost of capital. If in the long term, ROCE, return on capital employed, is lower than this WACC, this weighted average cost of capital, the company destroys value. If on the contrary, this return on capital employed is higher than the WACC, the weighted average cost of capital, the company creates value. This creation or destruction of value will obviously impact the value of the firm. Maybe in the future, we'll prepare another MOOC on valuation to go more in detail on these important matters. And the future value of the firm is obviously the prime concern of any investor or any shareholder. What happened to Gremlin? In 1999, Ian Stewart is quite happy. Orders are up, but he needs money. So he requests a loan and starts to see several banks in the UK. And all these banks are running financial analysis of Gremlin, asking the crucial question, why does this company need so much money and so often? After all, growth is great, margin, despite a significant decrease, are still good, so why? Net working capital is exploding as Gremlin is smashed between very powerful suppliers, big and tough competitors, and extremely powerful customers, Tesco, Metro, Carrefour, etc., creating a huge pressure on its cash flow from operation, which itself creates a dramatic increase in the need for outside financing. This is the typical and well-known equation of finance that so many successful growing companies have met at some point of time in their lives. The equation is fast growth plus acceptable, reasonable profitability, but not enough to sustain that growth, plus huge needs in capital employed, whether capex or net working capital, equal an explosive cocktail. If bankers lend additional money, what about the solvency of Gremlin assets? They are renting their building, so no money to get out of that. They use computers, very low resale value. What about inventories? Big uncertainty, and in particular this work in process with more than 4 million euros at the end of 1998, which still requires a lot of additional work. So you know what happened? All banks refused to grant additional loans to Gremlin. So what were the other alternatives? Issuing new shares? Gremlin raised equity 1 year ago in 1997. Is it realistic to do it again now with declining profitability and quite a hard time to pay dividends? Last year, you have seen they had to borrow money to pay dividends. Plus, the share price at the end of 1998, when problems appeared to be really serious, was divided by more than 2, from 180 pence to 75 pence. Second possibility, selling assets. Question is which one? Plus, it's difficult if you want to grow. If you start selling assets, in fact, you give up your objective to become a big player, a major player in the industry. Third possibility, selling the whole business to a competitor. That was in reality the only option to avoid bankruptcy. And in March 1999, Gremlin was bought by Infograms for 120 pence a share. It was integrated, and the brand disappeared. Infograms was the only buyer, and without it, Gremlin would have gone bankrupt. Very sad story, isn't it? A company which never lost money almost went bankrupt and disappeared. Cash is king. Profit is good, but this is an illusion. Cash is reality. When cash flow operation and free cash flow become negative, and if the investors and lenders community is not convinced that things can be turned around very quickly, it is the beginning of the end. Talking about ending, this is the end of our MOOC. And I want to thank you very much to have done the full trip with me. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed doing it myself. I remind you that you can subscribe to week 5 and assess your new abilities in financial analysis with a marked case study that will lead you to obtain your attestation of success to the MOOC. This would be an excellent exercise. As I've told you several times, financial analysis requires, before all, a lot of practice. The case study proposed will be Boston Medical Devices, a firm in the medical tool industry. You will be asked to use all the tools and techniques that you are now mastering to give your financial assessment of this company, Boston Medical Device. Don't forget to use the standard methodology that we studied in week 1. Identify the potential issues of the company and then conduct your analysis. This video concludes the week 4 and the first part of our MOOC on financial analysis. You will have our weekly live session in a few days where you will be able to ask your questions. I'll see you there.